Hi, I'm Matti Lehtinen from Karolinska Institute, and today I'm going to talk about identifying external causes of cervical neoplasia. I'm talking about hierarchy of causal evidence in medicine. I'm now ignoring case series and case control studies because we lack the uh, information and direction of causality mostly in these studies. Instead, I'm going to talk about ecological studies, longitudinal studies, and randomized intervention trials. Why are we talking about causes of cervical cancer? Um, the obvious reason is the epidemic of cervical cancer that we have been seeing uh, in the last 30 years in Finland among fertile-aged women. After a very successful screening program that was implemented in early 70s, the incidence of cervical cancer dropped below the elimination criterion that has been set by WHO, but it was a fragile uh, thing. And what happened following sexual revolution is tremendous increase of cervical cancer incidence in fertile-aged women. And the question is, why is this? We get some information from the health registers, mean number of lifetime sexual partners, mean age at sexual debut, proportion of active smokers. The proportion of active smokers peaked in the 1990s, but since then it has come down and cannot be the cause of the ever increasing incidence of cervical cancer in fertile-aged women. The mean age at sexual debut has been decreasing for a longer time, but for the last 20 years it has been roughly the same. However, the mean number of lifetime sexual partners has been increasing all the time and is the obvious reason for increase in exposure to cancer-causing microbial agents. So what do we learn from ecological studies? The thing is that ecological studies we can perform in Finland due to the Finnish maternity cohort, which is a population-based serum bank, which has donated serum samples from all pregnant women in Finland stored since 1983 until 2016. This means 2 million serum samples from 1 million women. And we can look for the incidence of cervical cancer and compare this to what we know from incidence of different sexually transmitted infections. And if we first look at seroprevalence for genital herpes causing herpes simplex virus type 2, we can see that there is not much change, perhaps even a slight reduction in the seroprevalence of HSV2 infection from the 80s to 90s in young adult women. As for chlamydia, the thing is roughly the same. Chlamydia seroprevalence has actually been decreasing in the most populated areas in Finland. As for papillomavirus seroprevalence, HPV6/11, the genital wart-causing viruses, the change in seroprevalence between 80s and 90s in young adult women has been negligible, as well as that of HPV 18. but when we come to HPV-16, that is very obvious finding. Incidence, cumulative incidence as determined here by HPV-16 seroprevalence has been increasing from the early 80s to middle of 90s in the southwestern Finland, almost 2 times, and has resulted in this incidence increase in roughly 10-year-older fertile-aged women. So, what about longitudinal studies? Mostly done in a nested case control setting in Finland and in other Western countries. A meta-analysis of these longitudinal studies as for herpes simplex virus type 2 antibodies that were uniformly detected by glycoprotein G2 antibodies have shown that there is actually no risk associated to previous infection with herpes simplex type 2 and cervical cancer. And this was important because this was a paradigm change since 1968 to early 1980s. The paradigm was largely that herpes simplex virus type 2 is causing cervical cancer, and the study by Vladimir Vonka in then Czechoslovakia was elemental in proving that there was no association, no significant association between herpes simplex type 2 infection and cervical cancer. And of course, the Nobel Prize winning hypothesis and work to prove this by Harald Schurhausen on the role of HPV-16 infection preceding the cervical cancer diagnosis was confirmed by our serological studies done in the Nordic Serum Bank cancer registry setting, but also by HPV DNA shown in cytological smears taken before diagnosis of invasive cervical cancer. It is of note that the seroepidemiology longitudinal studies, still the only longitudinal study on oropharyngeal cancer and HPV-16 infection, is showing similarly sized relative risk for later development of oropharyngeal cancer in individuals with HPV-16 infection. This is the contribution of the longitudinal epidemiology in this etiological analysis, and the problem with residual confounding is shown here. Chlamydia is associated with sexual risk-taking behavior and seems to be showing some borderline significant increase of cervical cancer risk, but the true cause is HPV-16, which is a logarithmic difference as to chlamydia. We will come back to this chlamydia issue, whether it has an effect modifier role later. Then a few words about randomized trial evidence. Prevention of causal exposure, if that prevents the disease, it can be considered the most convincing evidence on a causal relationship. What we have seen in HPV vaccinated women during altogether 70,000 in the early studies, 70,000 follow-up years for vaccinated women and 125,000 follow-up years for non-vaccinated women. We have seen significantly increased rate of HPV-associated invasive cancers in the non-vaccinated women, whereas no cancer cases in the vaccinated women. This was, of course, confirmed in later studies with special reference on the vaccination in the Swedish vaccination program, and really 0.12 was the relative rate ratio of cervical cancer in the vaccinated women, indicating 88% protection from vaccination in this Swedish study. In a randomized setting, we have observed this with the other HPV vaccine in the long-term follow-up for 200,000 follow-up years in Finnish vaccinees and non-vaccinated women, indicating 100% vaccine efficacy. Well, then a few words about effect modifiers. Now that we have identified HPV-16 as a true cause of cervical cancer. What we observed in epidemiological study was the concomitant positivity, seropositivity for HPV-6, 11 and HPV-16 infections associated with no increased risk of cervical cancer in these women. And it was relatively difficult to find these kind of individuals with both 6, 11, 16 antibodies 10 years before cancer diagnosis for the cases, but it was possible through the Nordic Serum Bank Cancer Registry collaboration. The question that remains open here is that which infection is the first one? Or in other words, do we need to have 6-11 infection before the infection with HPV-16? Does the non-oncogenic infection protect against oncogenic HPV infection only if it is preceding the oncogenic infection? And this we approached in a case cohort setting where we had two serum samples from two consecutive pregnancies from Finnish maternity cohort serum bank donors, and we could test for the risk of immediate cervical precancer, that is carcinoma in situ, in these women. And what we were discovering was that if an individual had HPV-31, which is an oncogenic HPV type, antibodies already in the first sample taken at the first pregnancy, being seropositive also at the second pregnancy, these women had 42-fold relative risk if the HPV-6 antibodies were not detectable at the first pregnancy, but the HPV-6 infection came later, HPV-31 being the first infecting papilloma virus. However, if the opposite was true, if the HPV 6/11 infection was there first, we could find only a slight, very low 1.8 fold relative risk, insignificant of cervical cancer in these women who had the HPV 31 infection only by the second pregnancy. So the 6/11 infection or 6 infection was preceding the HPV 31 infection and was actually working as a natural vaccination in this case. Other effect modifiers, we have seen that the approximately twofold risk associated to chlamydia trachomatis infection for CIN2 is the same in HPV 16 negative and HPV 16 positive women. The chlamydia trachomatis positivity is in both cases giving about twofold relative risk, which is suggesting that this is happening independently of HPV 16 infection. So chlamydia may be an effect modifier. The same was true for women who were smoking, and in this case, HPV 16, 18 seropositive and seronegative women had about twofold increased relative risk of cervical cancer if they were smoking. What about genetics? We had the possibility in collaboration with Finnish Red Cross Blood Service to link with the HLA type data they had for Finland in a population-based fashion. And before looking at specific HLA types, we did a meta-analysis on the risk associated to specific HLA types and found out that, for instance, DR2 and P15 types were associated either with a small increase of cervical cancer risk or a small decrease of cervical cancer risk. Both these findings were statistically significant in this meta-analysis. What we then did was that we were looking at the distribution of these HLA types, DR2 or P15 in Finland and on the western coast, which is inhabited already 500 years ago with a Swedish population. We saw increase of this DR2 type that was a risk gene for cervical cancer, and decrease of P15 type that was protecting against cervical cancer. And what was obvious was that cervical cancer incidence in this western coast area was increased. So HPV 6/11 infection, chlamydia, smoking, certain HLA type may all be effect modifiers of cervical cancer. What about then artificial intelligence and what is the lesson that we could learn from this etiological studies in cervical cancer? This is a recent paper in Guardian Weekly, where enthusiast is saying that we can cure all diseases, stabilize our climate, eliminate poverty, etc. with artificial intelligence. I think that this is hype. And the thing is that artificial intelligence-driven analysis on exposure data have coined a new term. They are not talking about causality, they are talking about causability, which is a kind of Orwellian approach to this. It's neo-language. It is saying that with the artificial intelligence, we are looking for exposures that might be causing diseases. We are losing the focus here. It's not about exposures that are causal. And the thing is that we should be able to identify actually paradigm changes, like in the etiology of cervical cancer, from herpes simplex virus type 2 to papillomavirus type 16 being the causal factor. And my challenge to artificial intelligence is that I should like to see identification of changed paradigm following artificial intelligence type of data. Thank you. Mä luulen, että se ehkä nyt mä sitä napsautin, mutta